Welcome, everybody, and really appreciate you tuning in. My name's Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Peter Bray, and we're going to be talking about storytelling, why it's important for storytelling, and Peter's also going to share some of his experience about how we can share stories and kind of make that whole thing kind of be a bit simpler. Because I know a lot of people talk about storytelling, and it kind of sounds so complex. Peter, where can people find you?
Thanks, Tim. Very excited to be on the show. People can find me at peterbraymarketing.com. Got some great resources that will help you get this really simple and use stories to actually get clients and customers, which is what it's really about.
It is, yes. And you are also on LinkedIn, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I am Peter Bray on LinkedIn.
I did notice that the Peter Bray photo on LinkedIn tended to be a little bit more hair.
How very rude of you to point that out, Tim.
Well, you know,
it did. Alas, I used to have a very full head of hair.
So did I. I used to have long blonde locks, according to my mother, when I was a child. So
wow, long blonde locks. Okay.
Yeah, can you imagine that?
I'm trying to picture that.
Yeah, no, it's kind of weird. Peter, you've been an actor, so you've actually been used to telling stories, haven't you?
That's right.
So tell us how you got into the storytelling line.
Yeah, well, that's really where it all began. Learning how to use specifically stories to help businesses get clients and customers began because I had a very portfolio career. I was in the entertainment storytelling industry for 14 years. So I had one foot in that industry as a professional actor, specialized in Shakespeare. I did directing. I taught at some of the best drama schools in the world. Was sent around the world to teach storytelling and acting in universities and colleges around the UK, around the USA. But then I also had a 7+ year career in the business and marketing, sales and marketing industry, where I gradually learned how to join the dots between what I learned in the entertainment industry, which is very, very difficult, very, very complex. That's where I was an artist. And then storytelling for sales and marketing, which I think has been overcomplicated and it's borrowed a little too much from the entertainment storytelling industry. And I think it gets in most people's way. So that's the story of how I kind of started to join the dots. I learned in between acting jobs, I would start up my own little side businesses and services, and always really struggled to get any clients and customers until was penniless, living in my brother's living room between acting jobs. And I thought, I really have to solve this. And so I had to get right out of my comfort zone and learn how to really help people with a transformational story that was very exciting to them. And that did all of the heavy lifting. I built an email list in the next 48 hours and nurtured that with stories. I really listened to them and used their language and helped them with the problems that they were really struggling with, and learned the craft of direct response marketing from that little business, that little breakthrough, and then became a copywriter, freelance writer, then marketing consultant, worked in digital agencies, helping a lot of different clients to get their message clear and build simple systems that would get them sales meetings, clients, customers, and recently have decided to create my own offer to help people to do this exact thing with the focus on what I think is most important and what's missing about using storytelling to get that specific outcome: sales, clients, customers.
So we've had a comment from Joy, and she's laughing at me, not at you. So just wanted to point that out. So thank you for that, Joy. So Peter, thank you. So in terms of, if I'm quite often small business, especially small businesses within IT, which is the market that I know, generally are started by technical people. And they understand the technicalities, and they understand the technicalities of a product. I remember going for a meeting, and the sales director said to me, "Did you read the website before you came to the meeting?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Did you understand it?" I said, "No, I didn't." He said, "Yeah, that's the problem we have. We're run by 3 PhDs." And and I said, "I haven't got a clue what you do." I said, "I'm completely confused." And he said, "Yeah. So how is it that how is it that we can get quite often technical people who are leaders to break out of, again, the comfort zone that you broke out of, and actually explain the story about what they do? Because it'll be something amazing rather than the technicalities of it."
Yeah, that's an ideal question to ask, and that really is the overwhelming problem that we all see with people who need this help the most. And what I do is I lay out a very clear rule. I say we're going to start by figuring out one simple story. It's going to be 1 or 2 sentences, and we're not messing with the hero's journey. We're not messing with case studies. We're not doing any of that stuff yet until we figure out this transformation story. I help this type of people to go from this state where they are now to this state where they want to be.
So have you got any examples of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
you don't need to name the customer. You can just.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the agencies that I work with, for example, they can go out there and say all the technical stuff as the experts about the type of funnels, the go-to-market strategy, this, that, the other. But the outcome, the transformation statement, is that they help, say, for example, I'm changing this, but SaaS founders who are stuck at 500,000 to 1 million revenue ARR to go from there to 5 to 10 million ARR, and they do that in 12 months. That's a clear transformation story, right?
Yeah.
That's the
Yes.
Do you want it or not?
Yeah.
But then what you get is people want to fill that story with, again, the language of their expertise. They can't see the wood for the trees. They're so in the zone that they can't step out of the zone to see what the zone actually looks like, what are the parameters of what they do. So here's what I use to help with that specifically. The rule is we are not using your language to tell that story. We're not using my language, whether I'm the copywriter, marketing consultant. It's not up to either of us. It's not our story. The language that we use is the language that comes from the people who are your dream customers. And that's, we can define that specifically. And we use the state 1 where they're at now. That the language that we use to describe that is
state where the
pasted.
Customer is, yeah.
There, the state where the customer is right now. Their customer, the expert's customer, is right now. The only language we're allowed to use to describe that state is copied and pasted from the words of their dream customers. It has to resonate with the number 1 desire in the hearts and minds of their dream customers, using the language that they use to wake up their spouse at night and say, "I can't sleep, I've got to figure this out," or "I'm so excited I can't sleep because I just want to get here." What do they journal about? What do they Google in incognito mode? That language, we can't guess that. It's not our job to guess that. And if you're my client, you're banned from guessing it. And so am I. Our job is to find it. And to draw it out, and then to test it to make sure that it's resonating with enough people. And that then is the language that tells that story, the before and the after, the thing that they really want.
Yeah, I had a VC on here, and he'd actually written a book about starting companies, but he'd actually started because of the fact that what they used to do was go to their customers after they'd been using the product for 6 months or something and say, "Okay, I'm not going to ask you anything. I want you to tell me about what my product does for you." And they got what the whole of they got it in their language, because otherwise, if I say, "Does it do this?" they'll say yes or no, but it's a leading question, isn't it?
It's a leading question. You're filling that story with your language and getting them to confirm or deny, and that's a great framing question. There's tons of framing questions that you can use to draw out that language, and yeah, that's a great one. That's a great sentence to use to get this kind of work process done and started. And a lot of the time, this kind of language is actually sitting right under your nose. Well, first, let me tell you a story of when I completely failed to implement this myself, because as the expert, it's very hard to not go with your own assumptions.
It's cobbler's children, isn't it? It's the
Yeah, exactly. Our brains are just kind of filtering out 99% of data and information. It's hard to turn those blinkers to aim at something new, especially if you're an expert in it. So I was having a conversation with something about a recent offer that I was creating to help what I thought the story was, people who don't know how to get traffic to get a flow of consistent, warm traffic. And I was talking to someone who was a dream customer and thinking, well, I've got it. I'm a copywriter. I'm a story expert. This is the language. And he listened to this, and he's been in business for about 20 years. He's got multiple different businesses. And he says, oh, warm traffic sounds rude. And it completely floored me that he didn't know. I was like, what? What? You must know what traffic and warm traffic is. And I'm sure he did, but it just didn't resonate with what he thought he wanted. So I had to go take my own medicine and do the homework. And for my dream customers, it turns out that how they describe it most is, I need to get myself out there at scale. I'm stuck doing small scale networking, one-to-one, word of mouth. I don't know how to get clients and customers out at scale. So yeah, that was quite illuminating for me.
So we've had a comment from Andrew. Andrew is a very regular watcher of ours. So he's saying good afternoon to Tim and Peter.
Good afternoon.
We've also had another comment from Joy. Thank you so much, Joy, saying interesting transition from communication to written communication. I do get lost on the whole messaging dialogue. Anything you want to add to that, Peter?
So from communication to written communication. Okay, yes. Well, I wonder if this is what you mean. Tell me if it's not. But I worked with a communication expert actually, who wanted help to figure out this process to get themselves onto new channels, and not just be relying on networking events. And they're great at communication, spoken communication. That's literally their expertise. But with written communication, what we did was dive into what they've already got and found that the most exciting elements, the most important elements of that clear story were buried. They were there, but they were chopped up and spread out and buried. And what we had to do was scoop them all up and collect them and then put them as the headline. So often with transferring, because in a conversation like we're having now, I can say lots of different things and it kind of naturally comes out in the flow of that conversation. But with doing this in written communication, you have to join the conversation that's already happening in the head of the person who's reading it. You don't have that back and forth. So they can say, what do you mean by that? Or, so it's this, and then you confirm or you clarify. You have to enter that conversation really cleanly and start. It's a kind of act of prioritizing as much as anything else, because if the most important thing isn't the headline, then people aren't going to read the stuff that comes after, and they're never going to get to the juicy stuff because it's buried. So often with written copywriting, you have to draw out the juiciest, most important elements that are going to capture and then isolate the attention of specifically the dream customers who you can help most dramatically.
Yeah, you never know an article's any good until you've actually read it. So in the old days, when people read newspapers, you could read a newspaper by reading the headlines, or you could read a newspaper by reading the first paragraph, which is really a kind of a summary of and it was usually in bold, or you could read the whole article. And it's kind of like that, isn't it? Where what we're looking for is that we're trying to get. We need to give the reader permission or to basically get them to read. And was it 10 or 12 seconds, I think, is what we read in chunks.
Yes, yeah. It's something like that. I've heard that statistic.
I come from
before.
the days when we used to write letters to people to try and sell them stuff. So,
great.
And Joy says, "Perfect, thank you, Peter."
Excellent.
I'm just going to put a question. This comment up from Andrew as well. Is this similar to Plain English campaign? They are an independent group fighting for plain English in public communication.
Oh, interesting. I don't know. I've never heard of the Plain English campaign, but it sounds like my exact cup of tea in a lot of ways, because that's the very problem that we're talking about, is that often the people who come to me for help are like, I deliver amazing things for my clients and customers. They love it. It's brilliant. It's genuinely transformational. But I don't have the words to actually communicate that to people who I could also help in exactly the same way. And the reason of that is often because they don't know how to put it in plain English. And this is the exact process. It's a short. So here's a shortcut to finding the most plain English that you can use to resonate in the hearts and minds of the people who you can most help. And this is something that I did for a client a few weeks ago. I went through all of her reviews. So if you've got reviews, testimonials, case studies, you sit down and you go through this, and you put them all in a Google Doc, and you ignore all the stuff that's about how wonderful you are and how great you are, except for where you highlight and bold specifically the language that people use in their reviews that describe where they were before they procured your services, and then the language that they used to describe what it did for them. So what was manifesting in their life before that made it that they're using to describe the problem. How was the problem manifesting for them, or how was the lack of progress towards what they wanted affecting them in their day-to-day life that's important enough for them to use in reviews, and then the same for afterwards. And I did this with a client recently, and she was absolutely gobsmacked that all of this language and insight was right under her nose the whole time, and yet she didn't have a process to actually see that this is the real magic stuff that was going to put everything in plain English. We didn't have to be good at writing. We just had to be good at listening and use that language to tell the stories that people cared about.
I've written in my notes when we had the prep call saying which look at the day-to-day life before and after, and then I've written make it dramatic. So you must have said that to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of a few key pieces of criteria that because I can talk about very mundane things in that framework, and it won't do anything for you. So we need a bit more criteria. And one of the criteria for what's a good transformation story is that it needs to be dramatic. And the more inherently dramatic it can be, without being dressed up, then the easier it's going to be to sell what you're selling. So for example, if I use that example of a digital agency who wants to help their clients with sales and marketing, I could have said going from 500 to a million a year in ARR to 1.2 million a year in ARR. It's not very dramatic. It's not a very big jump. The gap between where someone is now and where they could be with your help needs to be big enough for it to have a sense of drama and spectacle. And here's the interesting thing about where I approach copywriting from, because I want to make a very clear caveat here. I do not condone exaggerating, distorting, or playing tricks, manipulation. I don't really like thinking of what I do as persuasion, because all of that falls in the category of what I think of as putting lipstick on a pig. marketing and copywriting. What I much prefer to do is actually draw out and find what clients and customers really think is already dramatic that they've experienced, or that makes them pay extra attention to you specifically. And they think, finally, this is what I've been looking for. No one else talks about this. You talk about this. That is what would be most dramatic for me to experience. And if you don't have anything like that, well, then you need to make something like that. So you might actually need to adjust your offer to make the results more dramatic. And you can find that out similarly by doing research. You can trawl product reviews on sites like Amazon or whatever for books and things like that, and read the reviews, especially the negative reviews, and find out what people are disappointed by, because it's specifically what they needed help with. Because then you've got something that's going to be dramatically helpful to at least one person, and that's better than what most people use to create their business stories, their transformation offers, their copy, their marketing, their sales pages, which is just guesswork or making it up as the expert.
I always find the negative reviews on Amazon are far more interesting than the positive ones.
Yeah, they're much more juicy, aren't they?
They're much yes, and because I can, if someone says, or on TripAdvisor or something like that, says, it says, oh, I didn't like it because it was a cottage, and it's like, well, actually, I want a cottage. I want the fact that the tap's dripping, because that's kind of what a cottage is about, isn't it? If I wanted to stay in a box, I'd go and stay at the local Hilton or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, Peter, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about storytelling. And thank you for Joy and Andrew for all your comments. Peter, where can people find you?
Yes, you can head to peterbraymarketing.com, and I've got a great free tool that helps you get this done, that really walks you through the steps. It's a free educational email course that just drips it in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. So you've actually got all the components you need for a simple story that's going to resonate with your really dream buyers and make it very easy to sell. Thanks so much for having me on the show as well.
You're welcome, Peter. And thank you so much for coming on from the wonderful, beautiful Leamington Spa.
Oh, a pleasure.